One, two, 1, 2. Oh my gosh, we are live as can be. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Dom Famularo. We're here for Vader Percussion, and we put these Tuesdays at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time shows together so we can have the chance to let you all see and hear and be aware of what's happening in the incredible world of Vader Percussion. We've got so many great artists that we have, and these shows are fun because we want to take them into a little different area as we do these different shows. We'll have great musicians on, as we have today, but we'll also kind of bring different combinations, different topics on. So for example, like I want to bring on maybe next week some special discussions with several players. And I want to talk about mental health and substance abuse. And I think if we bring on some players to do this, this will be here. We're going to have Victor Indrizo, fantastic Vader artist, Drew Hester, Joe Walsh. Come on, Joe Walsh, guitarist and vocalist from the Eagles, and Jason Fries, who's a keyboardist and multi-instrumentalist for Green Day. So we're going to bring them on. We're going to have that talk, and we're going to let everybody kind of see and learn about some of the challenges, especially now with the pandemic as it's happening, just to make sure we can stay in control of ourselves. And I think hearing everyone's story will be extremely helpful to everybody at any instrument. So Vader Percussion, again, leads the way. This is very, very exciting. But today I've got an artist that I always say, I love his playing. He's such a great pocket player. He's so sincere to always serve the song and play for the music. He's been doing this for years, an incredible Vader artist. Would you please welcome Mr. Curt Bisquera?
What's happening? I don't know if you guys know, but Vader just came out with Vader Glasses. So they're great. And mine are the Fusion Acorn version, and they're really comfortable. And I can see much better.
Now, as I said, he's an unsung hero and also an insane hero. So we've got a little bit of insanity that we have with Gertie.
Aren't we all though? I mean, drummers are just crazy, and I always attribute it to because we sit in the back and we could see the whole stage. We could see the artist, the bass player, the guitar player, the keyboard player, the horn section, the background singers, and it's a circus up there, and we're the ringleaders, really.
And you think about it, we've got that seat in that arena that allows us to see everything.
Everything.
You know, and in the old days when we did weddings and those kind of jobs and people would come out dancing, we would see people who were dancing, and you see people who could dance really well. As we were playing, they were dancing in time, and other people that were dancing like Jerry Lewis and had no sense of time, but we still had to play. And, you know, witnessing all of that, that really is, I think, what shapes us all.
Exactly. And especially the audience members that are clapping on the 1 and 3. And I'd always challenge myself, you know, wherever I'd be touring, I'd challenge myself like, okay, let me see if I could still keep the pocket without getting thrown off, watching that whole group of people over there clapping on the 1 and 3.
What a frustrating, you know, Jeff Beccaro and I used to talk about that all the time, about people that clapped on 1 and 3 and how challenging that was. When he was a young child in school, he was in the music class and the teacher had them all marching around. This was, I think, in kindergarten or first grade, clapping on 1 and 3. And Jeff would not clap on 1 and 3, he would clap on 2 and 4. And the teacher got very frustrated with him and said, Jeff, I want you to clap with the entire class. And Jeff, the only child out of 30 some odd kids, said, you're clapping in the wrong place. The teacher said, this is unacceptable. So they ended up calling in Joe and Eileen to the school. And when they said, listen, your child's not listening, he's undisciplined. So Joe said, well, what happened? He said, well, the teacher was in class and everyone was clapping on 1 and 3 and he wouldn't clap on 1 and 3. So Joe said, my son's right. I said, he's not going to be punished. He's going to be rewarded for that action.
Yeah, God bless Joe P, man. Oh.
What a beautiful man, right?
I miss that man. And you know, that's so funny about that story because I remember Joe P and Aileen telling my wife and I that story. And it was just like, that's so Jeff, you know, even at a young age, he's already like leading the pack.
You know, it's amazing, Curt, because you started, you know, you made the move into LA, you started going to school at MI. Joe was there, Ralph Humphrey's there. I mean, these are some great musicians, great minds, intelligent, emotional, skilled with technique and creativity. Listen, those two guys have always had the utmost respect for me. And having lost Joe P recently, you know, he was a blessing to us all. But you're in there, you're going to school, you're learning, and you then had to, the pressure was, when you got the audition for Morris Day and the time, they wanted you, but you didn't finish your schooling.
I finished 2.5 weeks early because Morris was auditioning, right at the time we're just about to graduate, in like 2.5 weeks. And I got the gig. And my dear friend and my instructor at the time, who was seeing to it that I was getting my tests and exercises together to graduate, Maria Martinez. Hi, Maria. She's like, I'm giving you your test early and you're getting the hell out of here. I said, but Maria, I want to graduate. She goes, no, you're going to graduate. She goes, the whole point of you spending your money to come to the school is for you to go do exactly what you got called to do, to go play with Morris Day. So we took my test early and she passed me and she said, now get the hell out of here and go make some money and go on tour and see the world. So thanks to Maria Martinez and I'm here.
But isn't that we talk about the dream of being able to make the move to LA and for the being discovered and you really are living an incredible story.
I am. I always dreamed of. One of my early stories was at the CBS Television Center in Hollywood, next to Fairfax High. It's where they filmed the Bill Maher show and The Price is Right. It's all the TV stuff that goes on there. When I was little, I was 8 years old, and there was a show on TV called the Ted Mack
Amateur Hour.
Amateur Hour.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I remember my parents driving me down there with my drum set in the back of the station wagon because they're determined to get their son on TV to play drums. And we drove down there, and sure enough, it was closed. It was an off day. It was a dark day where they weren't taping. And I remember my dad and my mom being so, not knowing anything about the entertainment industry, but they were so just disappointed that they weren't able to get me in there. And that always stuck with me. Like, well, if they went through all the way to drive 3 hours from Santa Maria to Los Angeles to get me to get on a TV show, I must be worth something.
Yeah.
And I say that not out of ego, but out of having your parents believe in you, which instilled belief in myself. So when I moved down to LA to go to MI, I drove down in my pickup truck with my drums in the back. And my whole mantra driving all the way down to LA was, I have something that no one else has to offer. Mm-hmm. So when I get to LA, I'll have something to offer that no one else has. And I just kept mantraing that to myself. And all of you out there have that. We all have that, and we mimic and we imitate. We will do that. But that's what builds us to our own character, and that's where I'm at now. I feel like I finally found myself and I play the way I play.
What a great sense of, as I say, self-empowerment, and that's a gift that everyone should have, but your parents really kind of, blessed you with that. And your mom, who was a great organ player
and piano. Yeah.
It's kind of where all that kind of came in.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she was 8.5 months pregnant when she was playing in her jazz trio, playing B3 organ, kicking pedals. And I think I told the story many times about, being at the NAMM show a few years ago and being in the drum hall, which is 4 halls away from the keyboard hall, and hearing a B3 organ playing. And I just, without thinking, I just stuck my thumb in my mouth and hobbled over to the keyboard hall. And I turn around and there's Joey DeFrancesco playing B3 organ. And my ear is just so attuned to B3 organ.
Yeah.
I just,
Well, what a beautiful sound to play, and then so you went on. So you're doing Morris Day, you're doing that tour, you're hitting the road. You're young, you're hitting the road, and it taught you first the experiences about being on the road. How was that first road trip that now you're hitting the ground running?
Man, it was exciting, exhilarating, and really nerve-wracking because, again, coming up and playing in clubs and, playing local little theaters and performances in my hometown in Santa Maria, that's one thing. But to actually go travel on a plane or a bus to a big venue, like, I remember one of the first gigs was the Superdome in New Orleans, playing the Budweiser Superfest with the Pointer Sisters, New Edition, Luther Vandross, and Morris Day. Those are the 4 headlining acts. And, there's, 60, 70,000 people in the Superdome. And being 19, 20 years old doing that was like unheard of. And I never felt it before. And it was exhilarating and exciting and scary. But the more and more I played and more I did it, I got more comfortable with it.
Think about being exposed to not only performing at that level, but hearing the other acts that you're playing with.
Yeah.
You're taking this in. You're being influenced by Luther Vandross. Come on, man. His band was incredible when it came down to just funk and R&B and stuff.
The great Yogi Horton was back there.
Yogi, what a great guy from New York, man. Yogi was a great player.
And talk about groove and feel and time. I mean, here was a guy that, Luther traveled with an orchestra, and there's Yogi playing these super slow ballads, Luther Vandross style, and the command that he played with all that space, and there was nothing happening. There was no drums. And I'm going, how's he doing this? And that's one of the first things I remember being on tour and watching Yogi Horton, was watching how he commanded space. No notes, no playing, nothing. And it was all because where he set the time and the feel and where he put it. And that was like, oh my God, that's the role of the drummer right there. Yeah. And then you could add upon that. That was the thing. It was like, oh, great. So you could play from nothing, like literally play drums, nothing to everything.
Yeah. A player like that, Yogi Horton, who I had the chance of meeting with in New York in the early days at Drummers Collective when he would do some clinics there.
Yeah, Drummers Collective.
Oh, and just had to hang out with him. He really understood music at a level of really, again, serving the song, but from a drummer's standpoint, really pulling it back to a point of not so much a minimalist, but he knew what space was. He was less concerned with the notes as he was with the space. What a powerful thinker.
Yeah, my wife calls that making the singer comfortable. Yeah. My wife's an established jazz singer, and she's like, the first thing I notice about your drumming is that you make the singer comfortable. And I'll never forget one of the things I noticed playing at Madison Square Garden with Elton. Yeah. I made him feel comfortable, and he would peer over his glasses and glare at me with a big smile, and I knew that he was feeling me. And that was like one of the greatest things ever to get from Elton, was that I knew that I was doing the job that was required, but it also made him feel good, Well,
it's powerful.
Able to sing Philadelphia Freedom with and be relaxed and feel like he could still play and sing and not rush or pull back or have the drummer constantly in his ear playing too much stuff, So there's definitely an art to that. There's definitely like you said, Yogi Horton was the master of it. Jeff Porcaro, master of being able to play behind a singer.
But again, that's why I say, Curt, you're an unsung hero, because you are at that level, and you have maintained that at a high level for all these years. I mean, listen, going back to the early '90s. So when did you leave off the tour with Morris Day at the time?
I toured with Morris from 1985 to 90. So yeah, good solid 5 years. And when he was off, I would tour with Pebbles, Shalimar, a bunch of other R&B bands. I toured with the great Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. Nice. So a lot of that was a lot of R&B and funk touring those years of 85 through 90. And then and then 1990s when I started branching off into pop and rock touring. And in 1990s when I also started, working in the studios here in LA.
Well, that's the next step, because what was interesting is that, so you're doing this touring, and at that time the touring was a whole different world in how you were touring. I mean, you were playing, and you're on the road musically, performing at a high level every night.
Yeah, every night.
It's that level of intensity. Okay, so now you come back. So now all of a sudden you kind of step into how did you get into the recording industry part of it? Because it was 91 you recorded with Paula Abdul.
Right. So that was through the great producer Don Was. And that's kind of how I got my start was through Don and Greg Penny. Those are two producers that really kind of took me under their wing and let me get into the whole studio thing and kind of dip my toes into that. But what truly brought me over the edge was one phone call from the late great Jeff Porcaro. When I was going to MI, his father Joe was teaching there. Of course, we were talking about that earlier. And Jeff would pop his head in every now and then to just check out the various students that were there doing stuff, And it wasn't until later that Joe P said, yeah, Kirky B, Jeff would always come in and put his eye on you. He knew you had something. And for Jeff to say that, and to Joe to say that, that really meant something to me, that Jeff was kind of eyeing me and checking out what I was doing. And one day I get this call from Jeff Porcaro. I don't know how he got my number, but he called. He goes, hey, man, this is Jeff. I'm like, yeah, Jeff who? He's like, Porcaro. And I thought it was one of my buddies goofing around, But yeah, he said, hey, man, I got this session I can't do. It's at Bill Schnee's studio, and they need you to be there tomorrow, 10 a.m. down. Get your shit over there, and I'll check in with you later and see how things are going. That phone call that literally changed my life. From that phone call, I was booked solid for the next 2 months. Solid every day, even weekends, I think. And it was because of Jeff. Jeff had that kind of power to wield because he was one of the greats, and he could just call me and say, yo, man, check out this new cat. You'd always say, yo, check out this new cat, man, Kirky B. He's, check him out. So, I get the call from Bill Schnee saying, hey, I just got a call from Jeff Porcaro, and he said, you're the guy. I'll see you here tomorrow. Can you be here at 9 a.m.? We'll get drum sounds, and 10 o'clock we start. And from that point on, my studio career started.
It's amazing when you think about it, the fact that, Jeff, what a powerful soul he was.
He did so much in such a small time.
In 38 years.
38 years, yeah.
Blessed us all with incredible music and great friendship. I met Jeff in 1976 when I moved out to California, and we hit it off there, and we just kind of hung out. And I remember the time when we were talking on the phone one day, and he mentioned your name.
Wow.
He said, Dom, he said, the pocket is deep with Kurt.
Wow.
That's kind of how he said it. The pocket is deep with Kurt. What that meant was you won him over. Wow. And that was interesting that and again, once you got the acknowledgement from Jeff, this was
it's being blessed by the Pope. Good.
Being blessed by the Pope was a step down.
Right.
But you were blessed by Jeff. It really was. He was that kind of person. So now you hit with Paula Abdul. That call comes in 91, and now you're in the studio. What was that like, man? Now you're in the studio. Paula Abdul. This is really big and huge now.
Yeah, now it's big and huge. It was produced by Don Was. It was the record Spellbound. So I played on a few tunes on that. Don Was produced. And the greatest story is that my wife and I owe Paula Abdul our debt of gratitude because that's where I met my wife. She was auditioning as a background singer to go on tour to support that record. I'd already played on the record, so they brought me in to help audition musicians, and with the possibility of me touring with them. Yeah. But it ended up being I didn't get the gig, and Sonny Emery, I think, did the gig.
Yeah.
And but my wife, who then I didn't know, but I was like, wow, this is hot Sicilian looking chick. She was auditioning as a background singer, and that's where I met her, and she didn't get the gig either, obviously, but that's where we met, and that's where we started dating from that gig, that audition. But that was really great because Paula was at the height of her career then.
Yeah.
She was that was, I think, her sophomore record, coming off of Opposites Attract and that whole era of stuff.
Yeah.
And so she was on top of her game, and MTV darling, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I didn't get to tour with her. But again, I got to meet my wife, and then I also was able to stay home and do more session work.
So now you're doing some more session work. So now 91. So now 93. Elton John, you did the duets album. Is that what that was?
Well, let's go back 1 year to 92, which was playing on the Wandering Spirit record with Mick Jagger.
Interesting. Right.
Right after Paula. Well, no, let me take that back. Right after Paula, I went to England for a couple of months to work on the first Seal record. And then right after coming back from working on the Seal record is when I started working with Mick Jagger.
So you're flying out to London. You're working with Mick Jagger. What skill base? What personalities, skills? What was it needed and required from you? I mean, you listen. You're at a real learning curve at this point in being put in these situations. These are heavy hitters.
These are super heavy hitters, and I attribute what I knew back then from earlier on touring with Morris and touring with all those R&B and funk acts that I worked with. And I'll never forget one of the first things that Morris said to me when I started working for him. He said, "Kirky B, after you work with me, you could work for anybody." And, when he told me that, I didn't really get it at first, but he was hard on me, and he got that from Prince, and he got that, Prince probably got it from James Brown, and so on and so forth. But his work ethic was heavy, hardcore. 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. That's how we rehearsed with Morris, and I think through that built my character to be able to withstand long rehearsals, withstand criticism in a good way, and then once I got into working with Seal and Mick Jagger, it was kind of like, wow, these guys are easy. They're easy to work with, because it'd be like, all right, we're going to run it down once, and then we're going to go to lunch. Lunch, we just started. I'm used to like hit it and quit it, and keep going, and that was my mentality. Coming from the Morris Day camp. But you work with Seal and Trevor Horn and Mick Jagger and all these people, and they're just really relaxed and methodical, and so that's where I was coming from, and so to work with those artists, it was easy. So I just had to pull it back a little bit, because I was a little intense. It's like, really, we're only going to take a 10-minute break? We should only take a 5 because we got to get into it. Yeah. And I was realizing, that's my R&B training,
Well, what a great school to come from. I mean, listen.
Oh yeah.
Morris Day influence from Prince, influence from James Brown. You're talking about a lineage here of some hard-working people. And in the music industry, I think the great thing about the comment is that, I always tell people, I might not be as smart as the next person. I might not even be as good a drummer or good a musician. But I always believe that nobody will outwork me.
Exactly.
I'll do whatever it takes to learn and get that skill down and to understand that tune. So that's a work ethic that has to come from internalized from each person, which you have. And I want everyone hearing your voice to understand that. That's what that work ethic comes down. And still to this day, that work ethic is what will bring you to success.
Yeah. And I approach everything that same way. It could be a demo for a friend. It could be something I'm working on that that I'm writing or producing. And it's just like, you got to take yourself seriously, that you lose focus, but you got to take yourself seriously enough to make what it is that you do to fruition.
Yeah. So at that point now you're doing Mick Jagger. So what did that lead to at that point?
Well, after Mick was working with
Is that when Elton came in?
yeah, Elton came in 93, 94, on a few of his records with producer Greg Penny and and Patrick Leonard, both of those guys.
And when was Terence Trent D'Arby? When was that?
Wasn't that? I think that was, I want to say 93, 94.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah.
That time. So, I mean, there was so much stuff like the 90s, labels were still thriving. There was still unlimited budgets for everything. And man, I was just working so much during the 90s because there were record labels. There were A&R departments. There were artist development departments. There were people that were scouts for new artists. There were just all kinds of integral things that were happening within the music industry, and then the music video, obviously, that came into fruition, and that even expanded it even more. So let's say one day I didn't get a call for an actual recording session, but I'd get called to, stand in and mime on a video for some artist, So there was a lot of work back then. And I feel bad for the kids that are coming up because they don't have that opportunity. The only opportunity they have really is, making their own awesome videos in their bedroom or their studio or whatever, But man, when I was doing it, it was all happening.
Well, it was definitely a different time, and we'll get into how you're surviving today because you're doing some creative things today also. But at that time, you were playing with a wide variety of artists. Now, as a drummer, we hold this wood in our hands, and we've got this tool has got to be displayed in a way. Yeah, and you play the Fusion Acorn, the Vader Fusion Acorn, which is a phenomenal stick.
I love that stick.
It's amazing stick how the rebound on that feels, right? And the balance.
It's it's funny, it's like it was made for me, and I didn't want to do the ego thing of like, my name needs to be on it. It's like, this is my stick. It's like, no way. This is the stick everyone should have. And yet I'm doing a shameless plug because the stick is awesome. Fusion Acorn. And I think the actual Fusion stick is pretty awesome too. I think it has a barrel tip.
Yeah.
But man, I just love this stick.
Again, the balance and feel, which is typical of all Vader products, which is a standard that is extremely the highest in our industry, which is really, really amazing. But you're holding this wood in your hands. You're playing with the different artists. Now you're playing with Celine Dion. You're doing certain dates like that. What was it like? What was it like adapting to each artist? And you're playing. How did you make that shift over for each artist? Because your schedule was intense.
I would always, the night before, listen to whatever albums that they had, just to see conceptually where they're coming from and what the music is like, and listening to their melodies and how they sing and what range, and the vocal content, the lyrical content. What were they singing about?
Yeah,
and that would always dictate what I needed to bring into the studio.
Yeah.
For example, I've never recorded with her, but I have toured with her, and that's the great Sarah McLachlan. And Sarah, as you know, an angel, a songstress, and her music requires little to no drums. And I just remember going, okay, I need to go into this gig supporting only her piano or guitar and her vocal. And sure enough, that was her original drummer, her ex-husband, dear friend of mine, Ash Sood. He was the original drummer, and the great Jerry Murata played on a lot of her records. And if you notice what those guys did on those records were very just super groove oriented, but really underneath what she was doing.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to do that live with her. I needed to be able to provide that boolia bass, if you will, for her to sing and play piano and guitar over. And that's how I approached every artist before I'd work with them in the studio. Unless the producer and the artist had a different direction. You know, some artists would walk in and they'd be like, all right, I'm not doing sappy ballads. We're going to rock and we're going to do it hard. And it's like, okay, I could do that. You know, so it's always about being open, you know.
But how do you, I'm going to ask you a dramistic question. How does the stick lay in your hand that allows you to go from that whisper to that yell immediately? Where does that come from? How does it lay in your hand? How are you able to get that? I mean, I know I teach these students and we go through this stuff, but how are you able to make that happen?
You know, again, studying with Ralph and Joe P over at MI, it was always about, you know, stick control and fulcrum. And so I would always, you know, like if it's light playing, I choke up on the stick. If, you know, I'm playing Spang-a-lang or, you know, bebop, jazz, or light ballad stuff, I choke up on the stick. But then as you rockers know, as you need to hit harder, that stick, that butt of the stick ends up inside of your palm. Yeah. And it extends so you get that power. A book that I'm going to mention, which has nothing to do with drums, but everything to do with drums, is a book written by the great martial artist Bruce Lee. He wrote his own book on his style fighting called Jeet Kune Do, and it's a book called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
Yeah, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. I know the book. It's great.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
And, you know, who isn't a Bruce Lee fan?
Yeah, yeah.
So as I'm reading this book, he's talking about punching. And in this chapter, he's talking about punching. And he was saying how important it is to, when you're fighting, and even boxers, great boxers talk about this, that when they're fighting and they're bobbing and weaving and parrying, their fists are always open. They're never clenched. Like if you try to throw a punch with a clenched fist, you won't get that far. You cramp up, the whole thing, you know, the physics behind that. So when Bruce Lee was talking about that, he was like, you know, before you hit the opponent, keep an open fist, and then at the point of impact, then and only then make the fist, that powerful fist, and it'll have more impact onto the opponent that you're striking. And I was like, wait a second, I can totally apply this to drumming. Sure enough, really loose grip, you know, almost to the point of it falling out of my hand, just super loose. But then as soon as I would strike that drum, really just clench that fist. And, you know, I get comments all the time from drummers going, man, how is it that you're playing so loud and it sounds like the drums are just exploding, but you're barely moving your arms? And I'm like, it's all about the Bruce Lee technique, you know, just the economy of motion, but making that initial strike with power, you know, and it's all, again, fulcrum and wrist and elbow and shoulder and, you know, finding your mechanics. And another thing about what Bruce talked about in that book is, like, in his fighting style, you know, a guy like me who's short, stubby, and, you know, a little stocky, I can't kick over my head. So his fighting technique was for you, if you were a guy like me, to kick the hell out of someone's shins, you know. You can't kick him in the head. My leg won't reach that far. And so I thought about it. I was like, okay, well, if I set up my drum kit to where I could reach it easily, but still be able to apply power to it, there's the magic answer. Well, I always tell my students, you know, in my master classes, set up your kit so you're able to reach everything within range, but still have enough room to give power to all the drums.
Well, that's really great, because that's the ergonomics of setting up a kit that is comfortable with us to allow us to achieve free movement, which is what Bruce Lee was all about, the free movement.
Exactly.
You know, tension is the enemy of movement, to be aware of how your body reacts.
Exactly.
And that's really fantastic. Now, in this here now, so playing with dynamics, you've got a great range of dynamics, as Jeff did. And, you know, there are a lot of players that are playing today that don't have a sense of dynamics. So where do your dynamics come from? You got this stick in your hand, but you've got this wide range of dynamics. Where's that come from?
You know, I think originally it comes from growing up playing in clubs, I started playing in clubs when I was 11. Playing in clubs with my mom and her brother. He also was a piano player, and he played in clubs in the Central Coast area. And they were always about dynamics. Okay, this part is where I start singing. My mom would always say, so you got to play a little softer. Now, fast forward to playing live and in the studio. It's truly about the melody and the lyrics, what they're singing about. It requires the drummer to be dynamic. If they're singing a love song, you can't be Achilles Priester in a love song. You can, but you can't play with. They're singing about love, and it's tender. In the arms of an angel. Again, using Sarah McLachlan as an example.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? In the arms of an angel, fly away. Hey, listen. Any punk rock band out there, if you want to do that version, I'd love to hear it. But with her, you can't do that. You just can't. And so you have to be egoless to play that way, to play with dynamics, and to allow the lyrics and the melody to speak through, because they're telling a story up there, and the drums are the last thing you want to hear. You want to hear what he or she is singing about,
Yeah. Well, that really is the best. And, I know Achilles Priester, who from Brazil plays Brazilian music.
Oh, he's insane.
1 inch off the drum. So he's got that range too. So when he's doing the heavy metal rock stuff, so I think people really have to understand that range of facility is really needed in today's music.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, it's one thing to play in your bedroom or in your studio and film yourself and play along to tracks. That's awesome. That's great. I did the same thing growing up, playing the record player with headphones. We all come up doing that, playing the music. But it really requires playing with other musicians live in the same room. Yeah. Unfortunately, at this time, we can't because of the COVID thing. You can, but you have to do the safe distancing thing. But there's nothing like the guitar player over here and the bass player over here right on you, and you're in the groove. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I can't wait for the day for COVID to disappear and we could all get back in a room together and make live music. And I just can't stress that enough to all these up and coming players. To once that happens, book a rehearsal room, set up in the living room, in the garage, whatever you have to do to make music with other musicians. Because if we lose that as musicians, we're going to lose some beautiful music. I mean, there's beautiful music made with computers alone and everything, but there's nothing like the human element, 4, 5, 6, 7 people getting together and making music.
Boy, just that energy, that synergy, that friction that is created on the stage, playing with other musicians and producing this wave of soulful, communication. It gets deep when it's at that level.
Yeah, as anyone would attest, I know you would, that music is a conversation. And when you add more to the conversation gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it sure does. It sure does. So playing in the studio as opposed to live, you seem to have a real wide skill base of knowledge, not only from drumistically, so to speak, but then musically, you've got a real good, wide range. And then just the fact that you are able to adapt to all these different genres. I mean, you listen, you pop and going back and forth from genres. It's like mind blowing that you can go from one tune to another tune, or from one band to another band, or from one studio session to another studio session, and adapt immediately.
Well, that was one of the things that why I wanted to become like a studio guy, because they got to play all kinds of stuff. And, I'd read all the names, Carlos Vega, Jeff Porcaro, John Robinson, Vinnie Colaiuta, Steve Gadd. I'd read all these names, and they're on every record. And I'm like, wait a second, that's weird. That's a Brazilian record. That's a rock record. That's a pop record. It was all over the place. And I thought, wow, these guys know all these styles and all these ways to play. And that was one of the things that really interested me into being a studio guy, because it gave me a chance to play all kinds of different music, which I love all kinds of different music. I could listen to, Meshuggah, I could listen to hard, dark death metal, I could listen to EDM. I could listen to anything. And I have zero prejudice because I see where the people get off on it. I hear it. I feel it. Emo music, grunge, going back to that, hip hop, all that. There's so much out there, and it's all a voice. It's all a feeling. And I can't express enough being able to listen to all kinds of music and appreciate it, and of course, for the longest time, I negated jazz. I hated it. I refused it. I won't play it. And it was because I came up playing that with my mom. Yeah. And it reminded me of playing with my mom when I was a kid. And I hated Girl from Ipanema. I hated Green Dolphin Street. I hated all those songs because I played those songs with my mom, having to play brushes. It's like, oh God, this isn't the Monkees. This isn't Kiss. And as I've grown older, man, I really now appreciate it that I had that upbringing, and the experience of being able to play all kinds of different music just opens your ears and your heart to the musician that you become.
Yeah.
Truly.
You mentioned talking about Jeff Porcaro. He could sing the solos of all these jazz greats. He could literally sing back Miles' solo or Coltrane solo or Charlie Parker solos. He would sing them. And he would sing this in pitch, in tune to the solo while it was happening. That's how deep he got into it. So it was amazing how those jazz roots, and we're losing a bit of that jazz culture. Listen, jazz is America's greatest export. It really is. That's what we did here. So
we invented it.
It's really an important part of the learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, because those are the roots to Achilles Priester.
Yeah.
The roots to Terry Bozzio, the roots to Jeff, the roots to you, me.
Yeah.
All of us drummers, and I've met some young drummers that only started listening to music, like starting 20 years ago, and there's some great drumming and great music from 20 years ago, but man, that's just music that has been regurgitated and redesigned and repackaged and replayed and redesigned for the times.
Yeah.
But you could listen to any style of music and go, oh my God, I remember hearing that played by Elvin Jones, or man, that melody sounds familiar. That was from Bill Evans trio,
Yeah.
And so it goes way back.
Man.
Way back.
The days of Elliot Zigman playing drums. He was a left-handed player playing drums with Bill Evans. We'd go to the clubs to hear him play, and that would stretch you out. Then we'd walk across the street to go to 7th Avenue South to hear Gad with the Brecker Brothers, and then heavy metal with Bozzio with the Breck. I mean, there was so much going on. So that's what you did. You listened to anything. Listen, from Meshuggah to hip hop. That's a pretty wide freaking gap.
It is. It's a huge wide gap, but I learned to appreciate it because there's feeling there.
Yeah.
Being a kid growing up in the 70s and early 80s, it's like there were two things that were happening big time: disco and punk rock.
Mm.
And I took a liking to both of them and everything in between. So when I get to hang out with my tax guy, Keith Clark, who was the third drummer of the punk band Circle Jerks, he's my tax guy. The only reason why I chose him, because he was the punk rock drummer for the band, the Circle Jerks. And I've been one of his long-time clients for 33 years, but this guy's an amazing CPA and an amazing punk rock drummer.
I wish I would have been around when they came up with that name.
Right. Yeah, we won't go into that. This is a family show. This is a family podcast.
Now you got to tell me, what was it like? You played with a variety of different percussionists. So what is it like for a drum set player to now have to deal with percussion added on to that layer of sound, where they're playing a variety of different instruments, from congas to timbales to effect sounds and cowbells and stuff. And how do you blend with that?
Play less. Play less. Unless you're Joey Heredia, who is one of my dear friends. That guy knows how to weave in a lot of intricacies with the percussionist. So it almost becomes like two percussion players.
Yeah.
Because he's able to apply his knowledge of percussion onto the drum kit along with.
Yeah.
I wish I had that gift. So as a drummer, my approach is just to keep the groove happening, make it feel groovy, sexy, beautiful. And Sheila E. or Luis Conte or Lenny Castro, they could do their thing and make it feel right,
But that's where that listening skill, man, this is at a high level, to be able to listen and blend and make immediate adaptation and reflex changes in the moment. That's a real skill.
Yeah, and that again, that takes pulling the ego out and just leave it at the front door and just absorb everything, and whatever criticism and or direction, take it, learn from it. I'll never forget, when Jeff called me to play on the Boz Skaggs record, that when he was starting to get in, he called me for the drummer. And there was we did this. I told you before our last on sessions panel, but I'll say it again. But he wanted me to replace the great Jim Keltner on a ballad. And I'm laughing because that's impossible. So, sure enough, I go for it. I take 4 passes, and I sucked. So Jeff did it. He went behind the drums and did it in 1 pass. And my point being is that you just listen and you absorb. And when he did the take, I was out there with him with the headphones on, laying underneath him, watching him. Because I wanted not only, bird's eye view, I wanted to be in his world, where I could smell what was going on, And from that moment on, I was like, oh, that's how you play a ballad. And that reverts back to playing nothing. Going back to the great Yogi Horton, playing nothing. And allowing the vocal, allowing the music to happen.
And there are certain players that really kind of get that. With Gad, when you go here.
Oh my God. Another master of that.
It's these guys. There's so many people out there to learn from and listen from, but you really have kind of pulled in from everybody. You're aware of everybody. You've listened to everybody. That's a huge, important part of the quality of understanding music in its bigger picture. Listening to everyone.
It is. It really, really is. There's so many great drummers out there now that I tune into my account. There's all these drummers that are amazing. They're amazing, like chops galore. And I could watch it all day. But then my mind, I start to go into that musical mind of, I wonder how they would sound in a band. I wonder how they would sound playing with brushes. I wonder how they would sound just playing 2 and 4 with no fills. And it's just as important as what they just showed me on Instagram with all those beautiful chops, the technique, everything, perfect time and all that. There's just so much more to drumming than just showing our wares and chopping. There's the art of playing nothing. That is an art.
That is a whole other art. But you've also had the chance of playing with other drum set players.
Yeah, I have a band with Jos Panos and Satnam Ramgocha, the 3 of us. We before COVID, we were playing all the time at Baked Potato, and it's a 3-drummer band, and we have guest stars come in to play with us, and
great players, great players.
Yeah, and their whole thing is like, that's so weird. After the night's over, they're like, that's weird. Why is it that I had a great time and it didn't sound like 3 drummers playing together?
Yeah,
because we all listened and did our part in playing our part.
Yeah.
So it became one, and that's the joy of being able to listen and be able to not play anything.
Yeah. Well, that would be great to have some recordings and stuff from that band. That would be really kind of, I think, magical to hear.
Yeah, I think we have one on the Drum Channel that you could check out.
Really, boy, I want to say you've done some great things in the Drum Channel. I want to, throw a word out to Don Lombardi. This is a man that has got one of the deepest visions in our industry of what he does. Beautiful person, a fantastic drummer himself.
Yes,
and just a visionary with what he's doing with Drum Channel. You're doing so many great things on that.
Yeah, I've been with Don with that since the inception of it, and I've seen it go through all the machinations, and it finally feels like it's coming into its own, and especially now that we're on lockdown and with this COVID thing, man, you can go to Drum Channel and there's a plethora of it's like the Library of Alexandria, man. It's like going to the Mecca of drums. You could do a lesson plan with Joe Porcaro, Ralph Humphrey, Terry Bozzio, Thomas Lang. It's insane. Greg Bissonette has a whole thing that you can study with. I have stuff up there. It's endless. It's endless.
It's like almost like a series of individual schools that you can study that school of learning. And I know some of the guys that I know have seen what you've done in there, just were blown away by just what you shared and what you have in there. But you're doing some coaching now with the pandemic of what's happening. You're doing a series of coaching now, right?
Yes, I am. You could go to lessonsquad.com, type in my name, and you could book a coaching session with me. And my whole thing is like, listen, if you're contacting me, I already assume that you could play. Yeah. If you can't, that's cool too, because we could get into that. But I'm assuming you could already play if you connect with me and we do a coaching session. My whole thing is I want to get you, whoever wants to do a coaching session with me or a series of them, is to get you dialed in to know how to play with artists, to know how to tour, what's expected of you when you go into a studio, what's expected of you to go in when you're on tour. All those aspects that's not taught with a teacher one-on-one. Rudiments, all that stuff is cool. But, man, I want to teach you how to be in the lobby on time so you don't look at your paycheck and say, why is there $100 missing? Because you were late. I'm going to teach you not to get out. Teach you how to function as a musician with other musicians on the road playing. So I'm approaching it from that concept.
Boy, that's a great concept. That also needs to be in book form, so people can take that and read that and have that and learn that. And that might be something that I'd love to see, Curt, you do, where you have that kind of a mixture of a method book and also a coaching book that can guide people along the skills that it needs to be a professional player in the studio, to be a professional player on the road. Absolutely.
Did you hear that, Hal Leonard? Hello. No, I'd be honored. As a matter of fact, Dom, if that ever happens, I'd love for you to write the foreword to it.
I would be so honored, because I'm a true fan of yours, Curt, because I think what you're doing is continuing with a tradition of playing that has old school values with new school approach. And that means you're able to adapt to what's happening now. So you're not just living in the past, and you're changing and you're adapting. You're like this chameleon that changes and goes and adapts. And I think that's it's a learned skill, but it seems like because of how you were brought up, that was really a natural evolution for you.
It was and is, because, I forgot to mention too that my mom, her day gig was working at the Columbia Records pressing plant, which was in my hometown.
Yeah.
And we would go to the record sales every last Sunday of the month, and you could get records for a quarter each. Or no, you could get four records for a quarter. And there were misprints of records of vinyl.
Yeah.
So my mom would bring home these records, man, that were just like all over the map. Paul Revere and the Raiders, Herbie Mann, Miles Davis, Pink Floyd. Like, so this is what I grew up listening to. So it was normal for me to go, oh, that's a weird experimental record with, wine bottles and water and, a dream come true for Abel Richards, right? But, that's what I grew up doing, listening to a bunch of different records. And today, fast forwarding today, that's what we got to do. We got to learn how to operate a DAW, learn how to record ourselves, which that's what my whole coaching thing is about. I could teach you how to mic up a drum kit. I could teach you what cancellation is. I could teach you a way to mic a kick drum, a snare drum, your overheads. I could teach you about signal level, signal to noise. I could teach you whatever you need to know so you could function in today's music scene. And we'll see what I've been getting from people that coach with me. They wanted to know. It always ends up being, hey, what was it like to tour with Elton John? Or what was doing the first Seal record like? Or what's it like playing behind, the Spice Girls? What was that? So there's those kind of questions, which I'll gladly tell you. But first and foremost, it really is about now we have all these tools. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any younger players that you hear now that you're listening to at all that can inspire others? I mean, Vader's always at the cusp of finding new talent. What's happening? Any younger players out there that you're hearing?
God, there's so many, Dom. Honestly, it would take me all day to name them. But if you're on Instagram, and I'm sure most or all of you are on Instagram, you could just go through and hashtag drummers, and you could flip all day long. You could just scroll all day long and hear the world's greatest drummers that are completely unknown. And drummers that are well known. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave that like that, because if I start naming people,
well, I know the scene. I get that too. But,
why did you mention me? It's like, well, yeah, you're amongst the greats. It'll take me all day long.
And well said. The research really is out there for everyone to do. It's interesting because with this process here of having all these players that you played with, it's curtbisquera.com is your website, right?
Yes.
People can contact you there.
There you could also contact me there for coaching as well.
And that's what I want them to do. Go to curtbisquera.com, and any coaching, any lessons, I'd love to see everybody that has joined us here, both on Facebook and on YouTube channel for Vader. Go there and contact Curt, take a couple of sessions with him, and open up your mind and step into the world of, as I said, that old school tradition with that new school, perspective. I think that's an incredible balance that you have, Curt.
Well, thank you, Dom. And I learn from these new cats. I learn what they're about and what they're doing and why. So that's just as important as my old school upbringing.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I thank you so much on behalf of Vader, Curt, because
thank you, Vader. Love you guys so much.
You've got a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing some time with us. Thank you so much for being the person you are. Good luck. Stay well. Stay safe. Wear a mask. Wash your hands.
Thank you.
We don't want to lose you. We got too much more that we want to hear from you in the future. So stay well with it. Thank you so much, Curt. Thank you
guys too, and thanks everybody for watching. CurtBisquera.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is really fantastic to have had Curt to have some time with us and just really kind of understand the depth of what we're talking about here with stepping into someone's life and really listening to how they approach the art form. Go there, CurtBisquera.com. Check him out. Spend some time with him. He's an absolute prince of a person. He really is. Remember now, in these next few weeks, the next week, special discussions with several different players. And we want to focus on mental health and substance abuse. Again, Victor, Drew, Joe Walsh, Jason Fries. We've got some great people that are going to join us November 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come by and join us. We've got some great, great people. We want to continue this process of what we're doing. I enjoy these so much to be able to have all these different players. Come by, share what they're saying. We want this to help you out. Spread the word. Tell your friends, both on Vater Facebook, both on Vater YouTube. Bring it on. This is so fantastic. Thank you, Chad Brandolini, who is a phenomenal resource of helping to put this all together. And he kind of manages the site the way it is. At one point, you saw him bop in here. That's great, man. Chad, thank you so much. Alan and the team, you guys are doing fantastic with making great product. Thank you so much for allowing us to hold that tool in our hand and really express what we feel. We thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.